but Maria is also, she's a lineage holder. She's got origin stories for us, and it's wonderful to hear the way that art of hosting has just evolved over time through its own kind of principle of self-organizing. And so a couple of things Maria said that we're going to pick up on right now is around chaos and order. And this idea of working with the unknown and the known, or working with the less visible and the visible. And one of the core models of art of hosting is something called the Chaortic, and someone will write it in the chat, but it's the combination of chaos and order. It's the just enough order, just enough structure, so that what is what we might call chaotic has the room and the space to find a pattern. So there's a lot of Greeks on this call, so please write in the chat your definitions of chaos. But one of the very simple, yes, thank you. One of the very simple ways of thinking about chaos is that it's a lot of energy and movement that hasn't yet found its pattern. So the first time I went and worked in India, I tried to cross the street. I lived there for a year, and it took me 2 months to learn how to cross the street. The street was, and people were nodding, it was 6 lanes. It was a 6-lane highway, but there was about 40 lanes. And I didn't understand how to cross because it wasn't just cars, it was rickshaws and it was lorries, and there were cows. There was always cows on the road, and people would go by the cows. And there was bicycles, and there were massive trucks that I had never seen before, and like entire families on one bicycle or on one scooter. And I just didn't know, I couldn't figure out the pattern, because the speed of things, it seemed chaotic to me, but everyone else was crossing the street except for me after 2 months. And the thing is that there was a pattern that was known there, and it was a pacing. There was using sound. People would honk in different ways. When the cow is there, everyone goes around the cow. It's sacred. But I didn't know this at the beginning. So for me, it was chaotic, but it wasn't chaotic for anyone else there. So this idea that chaos is energy and it's movement, but there is a pattern in there. The pattern can come out when there's just enough order. And so everything that we're doing this weekend, next weekend, and in January is this dance between just enough order, so and the unknown. And you'll see that in how we host conversations, how we host processes, just enough order, just enough principles for the emergent and unknown qualities between us to become present. So normally if we were together, I'd probably be on the floor with a flip chart paper. And so I decided I was going to be a little bit chaotic. First of all, I'm wearing my chaotic glasses, round and square. And secondly, I'm going to draw we have beautiful slides that we can give you afterwards, but I wanted to draw this because that's part of the fun of it. So chaos and order. So the chaotic was actually a word that was combined by someone by the name of D. Hock. And D. Hock was the inventor of the Visa card. So imagine the world before Visa. It was a completely different world. And when he was trying to figure out how to create something new, he actually went to the forest. He went to the forest and he noticed patterns. And as he did that, he began to see that nature has a lot of order to it, but if to the untrained eye, it seems like it could be very disordered. So taking this core element, not only did he invent the Visa card, but he worked on something called the Chaortic organization, and how a whole organization could work with just enough order so that the chaos, the inspiration, the divisions, the conflicts, the ideas in an organization could always be in a flourishing. So that's kind of an origin, a little drop of an origin story, and we can send you more on D. Hock and the Chaortic organization. But the one thing we wanted to really emphasize is that chaos and order together, well, okay, actually the first thing I want to do is, we've been in our heads a lot, and I want to do something with you where, so order has a pattern to it, and chaos is a lot of energy and doesn't have a pattern yet. So what I'd like you to do is take one of your hands and make a movement of order. So choose whichever hand. You might be right-handed or left-handed, it doesn't matter. So for me, my order would be something like this. Okay, so I'm going to go on gallery view and look at you all. So just find with your right hand or your left hand something of a movement that feels like order. So for me, mine is like this. Yeah, so now just amplify it a little bit. Make it more precise. Make it more precise. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Okay. I like all your orders. There's this, there's all sorts of, so make it really precise. We'll do it one more time. Really precise. Okay. With your other hand, Stella's doing it with both. With your other hand, we're going to do chaos. And so for you, chaos, it could be anything, but it's something that's unpredictable, that doesn't have a pattern yet, that you don't see the pattern yet, and it's got an energy to it. So do this with your other hand. So mine is something like this. There's no, you don't see the pattern yet. Yes, yes, I love it. Okay, so that's with your other hand. So they'll go back to the first hand order. So, and be really precise, okay? Yeah, I love it. Okay, and then the other one. Now bring them together and see what happens. Let them dance together and find a new dance. So it's going to be awkward at first. Okay, it's going to start to move into something else. Okay, I love it. Okay. Okay, so just go on the screen, see another screen, and do the second one again and see other people's. So mine was something like this. Okay. Okay, so that was, I love it. I love this group. Even if you're a little shy, it's great. It's great. It's laughter. So putting my order, and I love Mariana's, yeah, putting my order and my chaos together brought in like something completely different. This is what we do, and this is what we need in times of uncertainty and in times of complexity, is to be able to create just enough conditions for that new element to emerge. And we've spoken about this, Maria spoke about this before. In times like now, when fundamental change is needed, we don't work with what we know and just do more of it. That's not what's being asked for. In times of complexity and in times of not knowing, when humanity or your community or your family is journeying into the unknown, it's really important to have the questions that you don't have the answer to, like our calling question, to have just enough order, like some of the things we're going to be teaching, for the unknown and the unpredictable to have a place to go. So I'm just going to draw that here. So this is where you have engagement, right? This is where this work that we're doing, we invite people in. We have a nice slide coming, so if you can't read my writing, that's great. So the place of asking the question that you don't know the answer to, having just enough order and just enough chaos, it creates what we call emergent or innovative or newness emerges from it. And the pattern that you don't understand yet begins to show itself. And that's what we were calling collective intelligence. So this is the pattern of how we're working this weekend in all the conversational methodologies. You'll start to see this, okay? So the other part of this, though, that we wanted to show you is that the relationship between chaos and order creates emergent knowledge or new patterns or innovation, right? But if you go over here and you go a little further into control, there's a different set of things that happen. And this is more normalized in organizations and in governance in most places, where order and control with an L create a kind of standardization or what we call best practices. So you have a lot of, for example, plans, strategic plans where you move things forward in a certain way because you have an order already, and you're trying to create control so that you can create, for example, a McDonald's everywhere in the world. So that's a really good example. So you might see order and control together in management, for example. If it goes a little too far, it can go into micromanagement, but it can also go into authoritarianism. So you can move into control where it's control over, and authoritarianism or even fascism could be an outcome of that. So it could be everything from micromanaging, which might actually be needed in something like a lab, or for example, if you're going into surgery, you want to make sure that there's protocols at the hospital that have control mechanisms. So it's not a bad thing. It's just when it's out of control, it can be, or over-controlled, it can be oppressive and it can lead to authoritarianism. So that's one side of it. So there's a positive, and then there's also this, what we could say a negative, because for at least in my worldview, authoritarianism and fascism can be really harmful to people. It takes away the life. So what we're talking about is where life force really comes through. And when we talk about the chaotic, we're talking about a life force that's coming through. So at the other end, and the Greeks will love this, you probably know this, yay, the Greeks. And again, write down your definitions. But over here on the other side of chaos is something called chamos. And if someone, chamos, yes. Can you write it down in the chat for people who don't know it? So in chamos, and actually, Maria, will you right there? Why don't you tell us your definition of chamos?
Well, can I tell you how it came out? Because when we were working with the art of hosting at the beginning, we only had chaos, order, and control. And we were sitting at my dining room table. And my sister, who is not into any of this and whose house I'm in at the moment, she was listening to us and she said, but you've forgotten another state. And we were like, what are you talking about? She said, you forgot chamos. And we were like, what? And so it's the extreme edge of chaos, and etymologically the word chamos it's destructive. It takes you to death. It actually creates it creates death, or it brings something dying. So it's often in our Western world, we think that chaos is chamos. It's not. Chaos is generative, but the edge of chaos into chamos is destructive. So civil war, like the Syrians have experienced, is chamos. Anything that takes life or reduces life takes us there. That's it.
Yep, that's great. And thank you. There's a Greek spelling in the chat as well. This is really important, though, going to the etymology, and that we understand the kind of root system of these words. And the really important part that you just said, Maria, about chaos is that it's generative. And in our calling question, we were talking about how do we create regenerative societies, or how do we regenerate? So this is really at the core of art of hosting, is where we access a life force and create more of it in service to the whole, in service to the many. So as you can see here, the other part around chaos and chamos is if you put these two together and you move towards a pattern that has energy and a pattern that doesn't, again, the kinds of governance or regimes that can arise from there can also be authoritarianism. So there's a lot of forms that arise from these combinations. And what we're talking about in the chaotic is that the new forms that emerge out of things that are breaking down are relevant and in service to the now. And so that's what we're really seeking in art of hosting and in these kinds of conversations and designs and methodologies. So the other thing we're trying to do is build your chaotic confidence. So as a leader, as a host, as a citizen, that you feel comfortable in those spaces of not knowing and working with what you know. You come, all of you, with tons of life experience, and that's part of your order, right? And then you encounter the world and you don't know what's happening, and to inquire and have a question around that is really important. So as we move through these times together, these three pulses, these 3 weekends, what we're wanting to do is build our and your chaotic confidence. And the kind of leadership that's being invited right now is leadership that is actually comfortable hosting the not knowing, that actually is enticed, someone used the word intrigued, curious about the not knowing. Because if we come in with too much knowing at a time of a great kind of renewal and death and destruction and renewal that's happening right now, then we're going to miss some of the information that's living between us that's crucial for creating new societies or new cultures or new communities. So I think that's the piece here. I just want to add sort of innovation up here. Innovation, innovating, new forms. And this is what nature knows how to do too. Nature knows in this part of the world, for example, in Canada, in Turtle Island, it's a time of year of the loss of the leaves. right? So the trees took a form, they had an expression, they're losing that now, and then we go into winter, the leaves become minerals and soil. There's a whole kind of regenerative cycle that nature knows how to do. So what we're trying to do is also pay attention to what we learn from nature, that actually we are nature, and that some forms die and new forms emerge, and that's kind of the quest we're in right now, as I think a global society, but also locally. What needs to go, or what's going already, and how do we then host in the new forms that are relevant, important, and life-serving at these times? So I'm just going to stop there. I think there's a lot more we can say, but just going to stop there. It's a very rich model, but it's just enough to give you that sense of like how you build your, the comfort of dancing with order. Some of us might be a lot more comfortable with order. Some of us might come from cultures or families that are much more comfortable with chaos. But it's a dance between the two now that was really needed for anyway, creating what I said before. So I'm just going to leave it there.